Rain lashed against the windows of Seattle Memorial Hospital as Amanda clutched her newborn twins closer to her chest, her heart pounding against her ribs. The sterile hallway stretched before her, emergency lights casting long shadows that seemed to reach for her with phantom fingers. Behind her, the urgent voices of security personnel grew closer. "Stop her, she's taking the babies." The words echoed off the walls, each syllable a hammer strike against her resolve. But Amanda knew she knew what she had seen in those medical records, knew what happened to mothers who weren't fit to keep their children. The twins stirred against her, their tiny faces peaceful, despite the chaos erupting around them. Lucas and Logan, just 3 days old, blissfully unaware of the storm they were born into. Amanda's legs burned as she pushed through the emergency exit, the alarm's shriek piercing the night air. The rain immediately soaked through her thin hospital gown, but she barely felt it. Her bare feet slapped against the wet pavement as she ran, each step a prayer, each breath a plea for salvation. Headlights cut through the darkness, and for a moment Amanda's heart stopped. A sleek black BMW idled at the intersection, its driver a silhouette behind rain-streaked windows. Their eyes met through the downpour, the stranger's gaze steady, questioning. In that fraction of a second, Amanda saw something in those eyes that made her hesitate. Kindness, perhaps, or understanding. The shouts grew closer. "Check the parking lot." She couldn't have gone far. The car's door opened, and a tall man in an expensive suit stepped out, seemingly unconcerned about the rain ruining his clothing. "Get in," he said, his voice calm but urgent. "You're not safe here." Amanda stood frozen, her maternal instincts warring with desperation. The twins whimpered, and that small sound decided everything. Sometimes survival meant trusting a stranger. As she slid into the car's warm interior, the man who would introduce himself as Adam Shelton spoke again, his eyes meeting hers in the rearview mirror. "Whatever you're running from, I'll help you. You have my word." The engine roared to life just as hospital security burst through the emergency doors. Through the rain-blurred windows, Amanda watched Seattle Memorial fade into the storm, knowing her life would never be the same. She didn't know then that this rain-soaked moment would be the beginning of not just her salvation, but a story of love, justice, and family that would change everything. The morning before everything changed, Amanda Mitchell had stood at the nurses' station of Seattle Memorial Hospital's maternity ward, reviewing patient charts with the practiced efficiency of someone who truly loved their work. At 32, she had built a reputation as one of the most dedicated nurses in the department, her gentle manner and keen attention to detail making her a favorite among both patients and colleagues. The soft morning light filtered through the windows, casting a warm glow over the ward where she had worked for the past 8 years. That same morning, she had no idea that by nightfall she would lose everything she had worked for. Her neat ponytail and crisp blue scrubs belied the exhaustion of her 3rd trimester with twins, but Amanda had insisted on working until her maternity leave began. The ward was her second home, its rhythms as familiar as her own heartbeat. "Amanda, could you check on Mrs. Rodriguez in room 415, Sarah?" the head nurse called out. "She's been asking for you specifically." With a warm smile, Amanda nodded, gathering her files. As she walked down the corridor, several colleagues greeted her, their genuine affection evident. She had earned their respect not just through her work ethic, but through her unwavering commitment to her patients' welfare. What none of them knew was that this same dedication would soon become her undoing. It had started 3 weeks ago with a discrepancy in the paperwork. Amanda had noticed irregularities in adoption records, dates that didn't match, signatures that seemed too uniform, and most disturbing of all, mothers who had supposedly voluntarily given up their babies, despite their medical records indicating their desperate desire to keep their children. At first, she had tried to convince herself it was just administrative errors, but the pattern was too consistent to ignore. The investigation she conducted in her off hours revealed a disturbing truth. Seattle Memorial's prestigious adoption program, celebrated for finding homes for unwanted babies, was actually a front for something far more sinister. Vulnerable mothers, particularly those from disadvantaged backgrounds or with language barriers, were being coerced into giving up their children. Their babies would disappear into a system that seemed to bypass all normal adoption protocols. Amanda had done everything by the book. She reported her findings to hospital administration, trusting in the system she had served faithfully for years. That trust proved to be her first mistake. Within days, she found herself under scrutiny. Small discrepancies began appearing in her own records. Medication counts suddenly didn't match when she was on duty. Money went missing from the ward's petty cash during her shifts. The setup was methodical and brilliant in its simplicity. Who would believe the accusations of a nurse accused of theft and negligence, especially a pregnant, unmarried nurse whose hormone-addled judgment might be questioned? Her pristine record was systematically dismantled, her credibility eroded piece by piece. But then came the threats, subtle at first, then increasingly overt. Notes in her locker suggesting she should focus on her own upcoming motherhood rather than hospital business. Anonymous calls in the middle of the night. Her apartment was broken into, nothing taken but everything moved slightly, a clear message that she wasn't safe. The final blow came when she discovered her own name on a list mothers deemed unfit to keep their children. The document outlined plans to declare her mentally unstable shortly after giving birth, using her paranoid accusations against the hospital as evidence. Her twins would be taken from her and disappeared into the same system she had been investigating. The betrayal cut deepest when she learned who had signed off on the psychological evaluation. Dr. Sarah Henderson, the head nurse she had considered a mentor and friend. The same woman who had held her hand through her pregnancy complications, who had organized her baby shower, had signed the document that would steal her children. Even now, standing at the nurse's station on what would be her last normal day, Amanda felt the weight of her knowledge like a physical burden. Her hands trembled slightly as she updated patient charts, her mind racing with contingency plans. The babies kicked inside her, a reminder of everything at stake. She had gathered evidence, made copies, stored them in secure locations. But would it be enough? Could she protect her unborn children from a system that had already marked them for theft? The questions haunted her as she went about her duties, smiling at patients, checking vitals, playing her role perfectly while inside, her world was crumbling. That evening, as she left her shift for what she didn't know would be the last time, Amanda caught her reflection in the hospital windows. The setting sun cast long shadows across her face, and for a moment she hardly recognized herself. The naive nurse who had started her career with dreams of helping others was gone, replaced by a woman who understood that sometimes fighting for justice meant standing alone against a storm. She didn't know then that this storm would break sooner than she expected, that in just a few weeks she would be running through these same halls, clutching her newborn twins to her chest. She couldn't have known that her quest for justice would uncover not just hospital corruption, but a network of crime that reached into the highest levels of Seattle society, or that in her darkest hour she would find allies in the most unexpected places. Adam Shelton stood at the floor-to-ceiling windows of his corner office in downtown Seattle, watching the city lights flicker against the perpetual rain. At 42, he had achieved everything society deemed worthy of success. CEO of Shelton Enterprises, a real estate empire worth billions, with properties dotting the skylines of major cities across the country. Yet the reflection staring back at him from the rain-streaked glass seemed hollow, a man who had everything and nothing at all. The mahogany desk behind him held the usual trappings of power awards for business excellence, photographs of handshakes with politicians and industry leaders, and the day's newspaper featuring yet another article about his latest development project. But there were no family photos, no personal touches that might suggest a life beyond these walls. The closest thing to warmth in the office was a small stone figure, a family of 3 holding hands hidden in his desk drawer, a reminder of what he had lost. 20 years ago, Adam had been a different man. Fresh out of business school, married to his college sweetheart Catherine, with dreams that extended beyond profit margins and market shares, they had planned a family, picked out names, painted a nursery in their modest starter home. But fate had other plans. The car accident that took Catherine and their unborn child had also taken the part of Adam that believed in happiness beyond success. He threw himself into work, building his father's struggling real estate company into an empire. Each new project, each acquisition became a brick in the wall he built around his heart. His employees knew him as fair but distant, respected but never truly known. Board members praised his business acumen while whispering about his isolation. The media dubbed him Seattle's Ice King, successful, handsome but untouchable. Mr. Shelton, his assistant's voice crackled through the intercom. The board meeting starts in 5 minutes. Adam straightened his tie, his reflection performing the same mechanical gesture. Another day, another meeting, another deal to close. The routine had become his armor, predictability his shield against the messiness of emotional attachment. But lately the emptiness had begun to echo louder. He found himself lingering in the park across from his office, watching families go about their lives. Young parents pushing strollers, children's laughter carrying on the wind, elderly couples walking hand in hand, all the simple joys he had walled himself off from. His childhood home stood empty on the outskirts of the city, a mansion too big for one person but too full of memories to sell. Sometimes late at night he would walk its halls, remembering Sunday dinners with his parents, now both gone. His mother's last words to him had been a plea: "Don't let success become your prison, Adam. It's never too late to open your heart." The board meeting droned on, voices discussing profit margins and market expansions. Adam's mind wandered to the hospital project, Seattle Memorial's new wing, funded largely by Shelton Enterprises. The project had seemed straightforward: expand the maternity ward, modernize facilities, generate positive PR. Yet something about the hospital administration's eagerness to rush the permits through had nagged at him. The adoption program numbers are particularly impressive, the hospital's CEO was saying, his voice smooth as oil. We're processing more successful adoptions than any other private hospital in the state. Adam noticed something in the man's tone, a slight emphasis on successful that seemed off. He had built his empire by reading people, sensing the undertones in business dealings. Something about this whole project felt wrong, but he couldn't put his finger on what. Later that evening, as he drove home through the rain-slicked streets of Seattle, Adam found himself taking the long route past Seattle Memorial. The new wing was already half-built, its skeleton reaching toward the gray sky. Construction lights cast eerie shadows, and for a moment the structure seemed almost predatory, consuming the original hospital building. He didn't know then that this project, which seemed like just another business deal, would lead him to question everything he had built his life upon. He couldn't have known that in less than a month, a chance encounter in the rain would crack the walls he had so carefully constructed, or that 2 tiny babies and their desperate mother would teach him more about worth and purpose than all his years of business success. The rain intensified as he drove, the city lights blurring into a kaleidoscope of color. In his pocket, the key to his empty mansion felt heavier than usual. Another night of silence awaited him, but something in the air felt different. Like the calm before a storm, like the universe holding its breath before a moment that would change everything. In a dimly lit office of Seattle's most prestigious law firm, Nicole Parker sat reviewing case files long after her colleagues had gone home. At 35, she had built a reputation as one of the city's most formidable attorneys, known for taking on cases that seemed impossible to win. Her designer suit and perfectly manicured appearance masked a woman who had clawed her way up from nothing, earning her position through cunning and an unwavering determination. What her colleagues at Morrison Bradley didn't know was that her legal career served as a perfect cover for her other role. The elegant leather briefcase beside her desk contained more than just court documents. It held detailed records of every child that had passed through Seattle Memorial's special adoption program. For 5 years, she had helped craft the legal framework that made children disappear into wealthy homes, all while maintaining a pristine public image. But lately, the weight of her double life had begun to feel unbearable. Each new file, each new mother deemed unfit, each child reassigned to a carefully selected family, it all added up to a burden that kept her awake at night. The 6-figure payments to her offshore account no longer seemed worth the cost to her conscience. Across town, in a modest apartment overlooking Elliott Bay, Caleb Mitchell stared at an old photograph, his fingers tracing the image of 2 children, himself and his younger sister Amanda, both smiling, both innocent of the tragedy that would tear them apart. At 38, he carried himself with the vigilant alertness of someone who had seen too much of the world's darkness. His work in law enforcement had taken him deep undercover, forcing him to sever all family ties to protect those he loved. The last time he had seen Amanda, she was 16, their parents recently deceased in what he now suspected wasn't an accident at all. He had left her in the care of their aunt, promising to return when it was safe. But when he finally did come back 3 years later, both Amanda and their aunt had vanished, leaving no trace. Years of searching had led nowhere, each dead end another crack in his heart. Dr. Sarah Henderson, head nurse at Seattle Memorial, moved through the maternity ward with the confidence of someone who held power over life and death. Her warm smile and soothing voice had earned her the trust of countless mothers, none of whom suspected that she was the one who decided their fitness for parenthood. Her office walls were covered with photos of happy families, carefully selected adoptive parents with their new children, while in her desk drawer lay lists of mothers whose babies would soon be declared at risk. The hospital's chief of medicine, Dr. James Morrison, sat in his opulent office reviewing the latest projections. Each successful adoption brought hundreds of thousands of dollars into the hospital's coffers, money that funded research, new equipment, and generous bonuses for those who kept the program running smoothly. He had convinced himself that they were doing good, finding better homes for children who would otherwise grow up in poverty or instability. But the network extended far beyond the hospital walls. Judge Robert Carson, who signed off on expedited adoptions without questioning the paperwork. Detective Michael Brooks, who made sure any investigations into missing babies were quickly closed. Senator William Hayes, whose legislation made it easier to terminate parental rights. Each played their part in a system that had operated unchallenged for years. They had grown careless with success, never expecting that a single nurse's curiosity could threaten everything they had built. When Amanda Mitchell started asking questions, they had followed the usual procedure: discredit, threaten, isolate. But something about this case felt different. Amanda's determination, her refusal to back down even in the face of overwhelming pressure, had set in motion events that would shake their carefully constructed world to its foundations. What none of them knew was that the threads of their lives were about to intertwine in ways they could never have predicted. Nicole, reviewing her files late at night, had no idea that her carefully maintained facade would crumble in the face of real love. Caleb, searching endlessly for his sister, couldn't have known that fate would soon lead him to her doorstep. Dr. Henderson, Dr. Morrison, and their powerful allies never suspected that their empire of secrets was about to collapse. The rain continued to fall over Seattle, washing the city's streets clean, while its darkest secrets festered behind respectable facades. In hospitals and law offices, in luxury penthouses and modest apartments, the players in this drama moved through their lives, unaware that they stood on the brink of a storm that would change everything. The discovery that would shatter Amanda's world began on an ordinary Tuesday evening in the maternity ward's records room. She had stayed late, using the quiet hours to catch up on paperwork, when a misplaced file caught her attention. The name on the folder was Familia Maria Gonzalez, a young mother who had given birth 3 days ago. Amanda remembered her clearly scared, alone, but fiercely determined to keep her baby. Yet the file in her hands told a different story. According to these documents, Maria had voluntarily surrendered her child for adoption mere hours after delivery. Amanda frowned, remembering Maria's tears of joy when holding her son, her careful questions about breastfeeding and childcare. Nothing about this made sense. With growing unease, Amanda pulled more files. Sarah Martinez documented as mentally unstable despite showing no previous signs of illness. Lily Chen supposedly signed away her rights while still under anesthesia. Fatima Al-Rahman marked as flight risk with no explanation. The pattern was impossible to ignore: young, vulnerable mothers, many speaking limited English, all mysteriously deemed unfit within days of giving birth. "You're here late," Dr. Henderson's voice cut through the silence, making Amanda jump. The head nurse stood in the doorway, her usual warm smile not quite reaching her eyes. "Everything all right?" "Just catching up on some paperwork," Amanda replied, her heart racing as she casually closed the files. "You know how it piles up." That night, Amanda couldn't sleep. The faces of those mothers haunted her, their joy turned to despair, their babies vanishing into a system that seemed designed to swallow them whole. The next day, she began digging deeper, carefully documenting everything she found. The adoption records revealed more disturbing patterns. The same judges approving expedited adoptions, the same law firm handling the paperwork, astronomical processing fees paid by wealthy adoptive parents, and most troubling of all, medical records altered to create evidence of maternal unfitness. Amanda started arriving early, staying late, using her access to gather evidence. She photographed documents, recorded dates, collected names. Her pregnancy made for convenient cover. No one questioned a new mother's interest in delivery records or adoption procedures. But she wasn't as discreet as she thought. Security cameras captured her late-night research. Her computer access left digital footprints, and her questions, carefully casual though they were, had not gone unnoticed. The first warning came in the form of a conversation with Dr. Henderson. "Amanda, dear," the older woman said, her tone motherly but her eyes sharp. "I'm worried about you. All this extra work, the stress, it's not good for the babies." "I'm fine," Amanda insisted, "just trying to stay on top of things before my maternity leave." Of course, Dr. Henderson smiled. "But perhaps you should focus on preparing for your own little ones. After all, single motherhood is challenging." The threat was subtle but clear. That evening, Amanda found her locker had been searched, its contents slightly rearranged. A message on her phone from an unknown number: "Some questions are better left unasked." But still, she persisted. She compiled her evidence into detailed reports, making multiple copies. She sent registered letters to hospital administration, the medical board, even the district attorney's office. Each time, her complaints were dismissed, her evidence mysteriously misplaced. Then the retaliation began in earnest. Medication counts didn't match during her shifts. Patient complaints appeared in her file. Money went missing from the ward's petty cash box when she was on duty. Her pristine record was being systematically destroyed. The final straw came when she discovered her own name in a file marked high-risk assessment. The document outlined plans to declare her mentally unstable after delivery, using her paranoid accusations and erratic behavior as evidence. Her twins would be taken, declared at risk due to their mother's condition. That night, alone in her apartment, Amanda faced the terrifying truth. The system she had trusted, the colleagues she had worked alongside for years, they were all part of something monstrous. She placed a protective hand over her swollen belly, feeling her twins move beneath her palm. She had thought she was fighting for other mothers, other babies. Now she was fighting for her own. She began preparing for the worst. Important documents hidden in secure locations. A go bag packed with essentials. Cash withdrawn in small amounts to avoid detection. But most importantly, a plan for the moment her twins were born. What she couldn't know, was that her investigation had already set larger forces in motion. Her registered letters, though dismissed, had left paper trails. Her electronic searches had been monitored by more than just hospital security. And somewhere in Seattle, a brother who had never stopped searching would soon find the clue he had been waiting for. Lucas and Logan came into the world on a stormy Seattle night, their cries echoing through the delivery room at Seattle Memorial Hospital. Born 6 minutes apart, they were perfect. Lucas with a small birthmark near his left ear, Logan with 10 tiny fingers that immediately gripped the nurse's hand with surprising strength. Amanda, exhausted but alert, counted each finger and toe, memorizing every detail of their precious faces. But even in these first moments of motherhood, she couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. Dr. Henderson had insisted on handling the delivery personally, something unusual for a head nurse. The room seemed to have more staff than necessary, their attention focused not just on medical procedures but on Amanda's every reaction. "They're beautiful," Dr. Henderson said, her voice warm but her eyes calculating. "You must be exhausted. Why don't we take them to the nursery so you can rest?" "No," Amanda replied firmly, tightening her hold on her sons. "They stay with me." The twins' medical charts revealed why they were of particular interest to the hospital. Born to a single mother who was already marked as unstable, they were perfect candidates for the hospital's adoption program. Their father's absence from the birth certificate made them even more desirable. No paternal rights to complicate the process. But there was more. Amanda overheard conversations between Dr. Henderson and Dr. Morrison, discussions that made her blood run cold. "The Matthews have offered double the usual amount," Dr. Morrison said in hushed tones outside her room. "They've been waiting for a matched set." "Perfect timing," Dr. Henderson replied. "The mother's psychiatric evaluation is already prepared. Judge Carson is standing by." But the psychiatric evaluation appeared in Amanda's file the next day. It painted a disturbing picture: a nurse suffering from paranoid delusions, making unfounded accusations against respected colleagues. Her pregnancy had allegedly triggered severe mental instability, making her unfit to care for one child, let alone two. What the hospital didn't know was that Amanda had anticipated this. Throughout her pregnancy, she had maintained detailed records of her mental health, including regular visits to an independent psychiatrist who had documented her stability and preparedness for motherhood. These records were safely stored away from the hospital, along with all the evidence she had gathered about their trafficking operation. The twins grew stronger each day, their distinct personalities already emerging. Lucas was quieter, observant, his eyes following every movement in the room. Logan was more vocal, demanding attention with lusty cries that his mother quickly learned to interpret. Amanda barely slept, afraid to take her eyes off them for even a moment. On their third day of life, she overheard a conversation that confirmed her worst fears. Two nurses outside her room, speaking in whispers. "Tomorrow night. Once the mother's sedated, the adoption team will handle the transfer." Poor thing, but really it's better this way. Those babies deserve a proper family. That night, Amanda waited until the ward was quiet. She had memorized the security patrol schedules, knew exactly when the cameras in her corridor would be temporarily offline for system maintenance. The go bag she had hidden in her room during a previous hospital stay contained everything she needed: clothes, money, documents. But when Lucas and Logan began to fuss, she didn't silence them immediately as she usually would. Instead, she let their cries draw the night nurse into her room. As the woman bent to check on the twins, Amanda watched her expression soften. "They're so beautiful," the nurse said, genuine warmth in her voice. "Would you like me to take them to the nursery? You look exhausted." "Actually," Amanda replied carefully, "could you help me to the bathroom? I'm still a bit unsteady." The moment the nurse turned to help her up, Amanda saw her chance. Years of handling newborns had taught her how to move quickly but gently. Within minutes, she had the twins secured against her chest, their tiny bodies warm and trusting. What made Lucas and Logan so valuable to the trafficking ring wasn't just their status as healthy twins. They represented everything the operation thrived on: vulnerable mothers, complicated circumstances, and the promise of huge profits from wealthy buyers desperate for a matched set. But to Amanda, they were simply her sons, her reason for living, the only thing worth fighting for. As she prepared for her desperate escape, Amanda whispered promises to her boys. She would protect them, love them, give them the life they deserved. She didn't know then that these twins would become not just her salvation, but the key to unraveling an entire network of corruption. Their existence would draw together a broken family, expose long-buried secrets, and ultimately bring justice to countless other mothers and children who had been victims of the same cruel system. Adam Shelton's mansion stood like a fortress against the Seattle rain, its stone walls and wrought iron gates offering a promise of safety that Amanda desperately needed. As they pulled into the circular driveway, the enormity of her situation finally hit her. She was a fugitive, clutching 2 newborns, putting her trust in a stranger whose name she had only learned minutes ago. "You're safe here," Adam said, leading them through massive oak doors into a foyer larger than her entire apartment. His voice was steady, calming, though his eyes betrayed his own uncertainty about the situation. "No one will look for you in this part of the city." The house was immaculate but eerily quiet, its grandeur seeming to echo with emptiness. Modern art adorned the walls and plush carpets muffled their footsteps, but there were no family photos, no signs of a life lived beyond business success. It was, Amanda realized, a beautiful cage built around a lonely man. "The East Wing has the most privacy," Adam explained, showing them to a suite of rooms. "My housekeeper, Mrs. Chen, lives on site. She's discreet and can help with anything you need." He hesitated, then added, "I have a security team. They'll make sure no one unauthorized enters the property." The nursery, hastily but expertly prepared by Mrs. Chen, brought tears to Amanda's eyes. 2 identical cribs, fully equipped with everything newborns might need, stood ready to receive Lucas and Logan. The walls were a soothing pale blue, and a comfortable rocking chair sat near large windows overlooking the garden. "I know it's not much," Adam began, but Amanda cut him off. "It's perfect," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. "I don't know how to thank you." That first night was a study in contrasts. While the twins slept peacefully in their new cribs, Amanda paced the room, jumping at every shadow. Adam worked late in his study, his mind wandering from business documents to the strange turn his life had taken. Mrs. Chen moved quietly through the house, her experienced eyes noting every detail, her heart warming to the unexpected additions to the household. Over the next few days, a routine began to emerge. Amanda focused on caring for the twins, her nursing experience evident in the confident way she handled them. Adam found himself lingering over breakfast, arriving home earlier than usual, drawn to the subtle ways his house was transforming into a home. Mrs. Chen became an unexpected ally, her initial reservation melting away at the sight of the twins. Her efficiency in running the household now extended to ensuring the babies had everything they needed, often anticipating requirements before they arose. "Mr. Shelton," she said one morning, finding him in his study, "the babies need fresh air. The garden would be safe, the walls are high, and security is good." Adam looked up from his work, surprised by her gentle advocacy. Of course, whatever they need. The garden became their sanctuary within a sanctuary. Amanda would walk with the twins in the mornings, their tiny faces turned toward the filtered sunlight. Sometimes Adam would join them, his normally rigid posture softening as he watched Lucas and Logan discover the world around them. But peace was fragile. News reports about missing babies from Seattle Memorial began to circulate. Police cars occasionally cruised past the mansion's gates. Each time Amanda's heart would race, and she would gather the twins closer, while Adam's security team maintained their vigilant watch. The dynamic between Adam and Amanda evolved cautiously. He found reasons to work from home more often, setting up a temporary office in the sunroom where he could hear the babies' coos and Amanda's soft singing. She began to notice the way his smile, rare but genuine, transformed his entire face. "Why are you helping us?" she asked one evening, after the twins were asleep. They sat in the kitchen, sharing a late-night cup of tea, a habit that had developed naturally. Adam was quiet for a long moment, staring into his cup. "I've spent years building walls," he finally said. "Making money, closing deals, living in this empty house. When I saw you in the rain that night, something just broke. Maybe I needed saving as much as you did." The conversation was interrupted by Logan's cry, but something had shifted between them. The mansion was no longer just a hiding place, it was becoming a home, its cold grandeur warming with each passing day. Yet danger lurked beyond the gates. The hospital's network was vast, their resources extensive. Amanda knew they wouldn't give up easily, not when the twins represented such a valuable commodity in their trafficking operation. Each day of peace was borrowed time, each moment of happiness shadowed by the knowledge that they couldn't hide forever. What none of them realized was that forces were already in motion that would shatter their fragile sanctuary. The truth about Seattle Memorial was about to explode into the open, and their lives would never be the same. The moment that changed everything came during an ordinary afternoon at the mansion. Amanda was sitting in the garden, watching the twins nap in their carrier, when Adam's security chief, Caleb Mitchell, approached for his routine check. He had been thorough but distant in his duties, professional to a fault, until he noticed something that made him freeze mid-step. Lucas had rolled slightly in his sleep, revealing a small birthmark behind his left ear, a distinctive pattern that mirrored one Caleb had seen countless times in childhood photographs. His eyes darted to Amanda's ankle, where a faded scar peeked out from beneath her pants leg. "That scar," he said, his voice barely audible. "How did you get it?" Amanda tensed, instinctively moving closer to the twins. "I fell off my bike when I was 6. Why?" Caleb's composure cracked, years of professional detachment shattering in an instant. "You were riding that rusty red bike Dad refused to replace. You kept falling, but you wouldn't give up. I carried you home, telling you the scar looked like a little leaf to stop you from crying." The color drained from Amanda's face. No one knew that story, no one except her long-lost brother. "Caleb," she whispered, her voice trembling. "Is it really you?" The reunion that followed was raw with emotion. 20 years of separation crashed down as brother and sister faced each other, both changed by time and circumstance, yet connected by unbreakable bonds of blood and memory. "I searched for you everywhere," Caleb said, his usual stoic demeanor crumbling. "After Mom and Dad died, when I finally could come back. You were just gone. Aunt Sarah said you'd run away, but I never believed it." Amanda's tears flowed freely now. "They told me you abandoned us, that you chose your career over family. I waited for years, Caleb. Years." The truth spilled out between them. Caleb's work in law enforcement had forced him to cut ties, to protect his family from the dangers of his undercover work. He'd arranged for Amanda to stay with their aunt, promising to return when it was safe. But by the time he came back, 3 years later, both Amanda and their aunt had vanished without a trace. "I never stopped looking," Caleb insisted, his voice rough with emotion. "Every database, every lead, every possible connection, I followed them all. But it was like you'd disappeared into thin air." Adam found them hours later, still in the garden, piecing together 2 decades of lost time. The twins slept peacefully, unaware that their existence had helped reunite a broken family. "I'm their Uncle," Caleb said softly, looking at Lucas and Logan with new eyes. "I have a family again." But reunion didn't mean instant trust. Years of abandonment and misunderstanding had left deep scars. Amanda struggled to reconcile the brother she'd idolized with the man who had disappeared from her life. Caleb battled guilt over failing to protect his sister when she needed him most. The revelation brought new complications. Caleb's position as head of security now carried personal stakes. His law enforcement background and connections could help protect Amanda and the twins, but it also meant he knew exactly how dangerous their situation was. The hospital's trafficking operation isn't just local, he explained grimly. It's part of a larger network. They have connections in law enforcement, the courts, even politics. They won't stop looking for you or the twins. That night, after the twins were asleep, Caleb shared everything he knew about the corruption at Seattle Memorial. His investigation had been running parallel to Amanda's, though he hadn't known she was involved. The pieces were finally falling into place, but the picture they formed was more dangerous than anyone had imagined. "I won't lose you again," Caleb promised, his determination evident in every word. "We're family, and this time I'm staying right here where I belong." Amanda looked at her brother, seeing both the boy who had protected her in childhood and the man who had spent years searching for her. Trust would take time to rebuild, but for the first time since their parents' death, she felt the strength of family supporting her. What none of them realized was that this reunion was just the beginning. The truth about Seattle Memorial's operation was about to explode into the open, and the bonds of their newly reunited family would be tested in ways they could never have imagined. Nicole Parker arrived at the Shelton mansion on a rain-slicked evening, her Louboutin heels clicking against the marble foyer with practiced precision. As Adam's personal attorney, she had handled countless sensitive matters, but this case was different. The moment she laid eyes on Amanda and the twins, she felt the careful walls of her professional detachment begin to crack. "A mess. Parker specializes in family law," Adam explained, missing the flash of discomfort that crossed Nicole's face. "She's here to help protect your rights and the twins' future." What Adam didn't know, what none of them knew, was that Nicole had spent the last 5 years helping Seattle Memorial's adoption program operate in the shadows. Her briefcase contained more than just legal documents. It held the secrets of countless mothers separated from their children, all wrapped in perfectly legal paperwork that she had crafted herself. The twins were sleeping in their nursery when Nicole first met them. Standing over their cribs, watching their peaceful faces, she felt the weight of her duplicity like a physical burden. These babies, so innocent and vulnerable, were worth a fortune to the right buyers. The hospital had already lined up potential parents, wealthy, influential people who wouldn't ask questions about where their adopted children came from. "They're beautiful," she said softly, her voice steady despite her internal turmoil. Amanda beamed with maternal pride, completely unaware that she was confiding in someone who had been tasked with helping to take her children away. Over the next few days, Nicole found herself drawn deeper into the family's world. She watched Caleb with Amanda, saw the fierce protectiveness in his eyes, recognized the genuine love between brother and sister. She observed Adam's transformation from distant businessman to someone who lingered over breakfast, making funny faces at the twins when he thought no one was looking. The assignment had seemed simple: gain their trust, gather information, find a weakness to exploit. Instead, Nicole found herself questioning everything she had been part of. Each legal document she had prepared, each adoption she had facilitated, how many of them had stories like Amanda's? The turning point came during a late-night conversation with Caleb. She had stayed late, ostensibly reviewing legal strategies, when he found her in Adam's study. "You're more than just a lawyer, aren't you?" he asked quietly, his investigator's instincts picking up on something in her demeanor. Nicole met his gaze, finding herself unable to maintain her usual smooth deflection. There was something about Caleb Mitchell that made her masks feel paper-thin. "We all have our secrets," she replied carefully. But Caleb didn't back down. "I've spent years tracking this operation. I know every player, every connection. Something about you doesn't fit the pattern." Their conversation lasted hours, tension crackling between them like electricity. Nicole found herself drawn to his unwavering dedication to justice, his love for his sister, his determination to protect his family. For the first time in years, she felt the full weight of her choices pressing down on her conscience. At night, alone in her apartment, Nicole made a decision that would change everything. She began gathering evidence, real evidence, not the sanitized version she had previously shared. Records of payments, lists of corrupt officials, details of how the trafficking operation really worked. It was suicide, professionally and possibly literally, but she couldn't continue being part of a system that destroyed families. But her actions didn't go unnoticed. The hospital's network had eyes everywhere, and Nicole's sudden interest in old cases raised red flags. Dr. Henderson's phone call was polite but pointed. "We're concerned about your recent activities, Ms. Parker. Remember where your loyalties lie." The threat was clear, but for once in her life, Nicole found herself caring more about doing what was right than protecting herself. The connection she had built with Amanda's family, Caleb's quiet strength, Adam's transformation, the twins' innocent trust had awakened something in her that no amount of money or professional success could silence. What she didn't know was that her decision to switch sides would set in motion a chain of events that would either save or destroy them all. The evidence she possessed could bring down the entire trafficking network, but it could also make her the next target of a system that didn't tolerate betrayal. The attack came at midnight, when the mansion was quiet save for the soft hum of the security systems. Caleb was making his final rounds when the first alarm triggered silent, but flashing urgent warnings across his tablet. 3 black SUVs had stopped just outside the property's perimeter, their headlights dark. "We have company," he radioed to his security team, "already moving toward Amanda's wing of the house. Lockdown procedures. Now." Adam was in his study when the alert reached him. Without hesitation, he headed for the nursery, where Amanda was putting the twins down for the night. They had drilled for this, practiced the steps until they were muscle memory, but the reality was far more terrifying. "They're here," he said quietly, meeting Amanda's eyes in the dim nursery light. She immediately gathered Logan, while Adam picked up Lucas, both moving with careful efficiency to avoid startling the sleeping infants. The safe room was hidden behind a false wall in the library, equipped with everything needed to sustain them for days if necessary. But they never made it there. The attackers had clearly studied the mansion's layout. They breached the perimeter at multiple points simultaneously, overwhelming the security systems with practiced precision. Downed Caleb's shout came just as the first window shattered. Glass rained across the hallway as dark figures rappelled into the house. Adam instinctively shielded Amanda and the twins, pulling them behind a heavy wooden cabinet. The next few minutes were chaos. Caleb and his security team engaged the intruders in the main hall, the sound of fighting echoing through the mansion's corridors. Nicole, who had been working late, found herself trapped in the study as 2 men in tactical gear tried to breach the door. "Amanda," Adam urged, seeing a clear path to the kitchen. "Take the service stairs, we'll hold them here." But Amanda stood her ground, her maternal instinct transforming fear into fierce determination. "I won't let them take my babies," she said, her voice steady despite the terror in her eyes. The twins, awakened by the commotion, began to cry. Their wails seemed to echo through the house, drawing the attackers like sharks to blood. 3 men converged on their position, their intentions clear in their focused movements. What happened next would later be remembered as the moment everything changed. Nicole, having barricaded herself in the study, found a moment of clarity. She couldn't run, couldn't hide, not anymore. Using her phone, she quickly sent every piece of evidence she had gathered to multiple news outlets and law enforcement agencies. Then she did something that surprised even herself. She fought back. Using her knowledge of the mansion's layout, she managed to flank the attackers, creating a diversion that gave Caleb and his team the advantage they needed. The brother and sister fought side by side, years of separation forgotten in their shared determination to protect their family. Adam revealed a side of himself none of them had seen before. The polished businessman transformed into a fierce protector, his usual reserve replaced by raw intensity as he helped defend the twins. His years of martial arts training, maintained more out of habit than necessity, suddenly proved invaluable. The battle moved through the mansion, each room becoming a battlefield. Mrs. Chen, the seemingly mild-mannered housekeeper, showed remarkable courage, helping Amanda and the twins navigate through hidden service passages while the others kept the attackers at bay. Just when it seemed they might be overwhelmed, police sirens pierced the night. Nicole's evidence dump had worked faster than anyone expected, bringing a swift response from law enforcement who weren't on the hospital's payroll. The attackers retreated as quickly as they had come, leaving behind a mansion in chaos but a family intact. In the aftermath, as police secured the scene and paramedics treated minor injuries, they gathered in the kitchen, Amanda clutching the twins, Adam standing protectively close, Caleb checking exits, and Nicole looking both relieved and terrified. "They'll be back," Caleb said grimly, his tactical mind already planning ahead. "This was just the first attempt." "Then we'll be ready," Adam replied, his hand finding Amanda's shoulder. "We protect our own." The attack had changed everything. They were no longer just people thrown together by circumstance, they were a family under siege, bound by something stronger than blood or law. The lines had been drawn, and there would be no going back to their old lives. The morning after the attack, the mansion's library became their war room. Documents covered every surface: hospital records, adoption papers, financial statements, and surveillance photos. Nicole, still shaken from her decision to turn on her former employers, began laying out the true scope of Seattle Memorial's operation. "It goes deeper than just the hospital," she explained, spreading files across Adam's mahogany desk. "There's a network of judges, lawyers, and politicians. Each adoption brings in anywhere from $200,000 to $500,000, depending on the child's desirability." Her voice caught on the last word, disgust evident in her tone. Caleb stood by the window, his stance alert even in the supposed safety of daylight. The twins would have been their most valuable acquisition yet. Healthy, identical, no father in the picture, they could have asked for millions. Amanda, cradling Logan while Lucas slept in a bassinet nearby, felt sick at the thought. How many others? How many mothers have lost their children to these people? The numbers were staggering. Nicole's records revealed hundreds of cases over the past 5 years alone. Young mothers, often immigrants or those from disadvantaged backgrounds, systematically stripped of their children through a combination of legal manipulation and outright coercion. "Dr. Henderson isn't just a head nurse," Nicole continued, pulling out a thick folder. "She's the talent scout. She identifies vulnerable mothers, ones unlikely to have the resources to fight back. Then the system takes over false psychiatric evaluations, manipulated medical records, rushed court hearings with predetermined outcomes." Adam, who had been quietly reviewing financial documents, looked up sharply. "The new wing at Seattle Memorial, the one my company was contracted to build, the funding doesn't add up. They're using it to launder the adoption money." The investigation took on new urgency as they began connecting the dots. Judge Robert Carson had signed off on over 200 expedited adoptions in the past year alone, each case following the same pattern. Detective Michael Brooks had systematically buried any complaints that reached the police. Even the city's most prominent child welfare advocates were implicated, their silence bought with generous donations. "We need to be careful," Caleb warned. "These people have everything to lose. They won't hesitate to eliminate any threat." But careful didn't mean inactive. They began building their case methodically, gathering evidence that even the most corrupt officials couldn't ignore. Nicole's legal expertise, now turned against her former clients, proved invaluable in navigating the complex web of laws and regulations. Amanda contributed her own detailed records from her time at the hospital, notes, observations, patterns she had noticed but hadn't fully understood until now. Each piece of evidence added to a damning picture of systematic exploitation. Adam's business connections provided another avenue of investigation. His company's audit of the hospital construction project revealed a complex money laundering operation that stretched across multiple states. The new wing wasn't just a building project, it was designed to help legitimize millions in illegal adoption proceeds. As they dug deeper, they discovered something even more disturbing. Seattle Memorial wasn't unique, it was part of a larger network of hospitals running similar operations. The same names kept appearing in different cities, the same patterns of corruption and exploitation repeated across state lines. The breakthrough came from an unexpected source. Mrs. Chen, who had been quietly observing their investigation while caring for the twins, revealed that her own daughter had been a victim of the system years ago. Her testimony provided a personal face to the corruption, and her connections in Seattle's Chinese community helped uncover more victims willing to come forward. "We're not just fighting for the twins anymore," Amanda realized, watching as more and more families came forward with their stories. "We're fighting for every mother who's ever had their child stolen by these people." The evidence they gathered painted a picture of corruption so vast it seemed almost impossible to combat. But with each new document, each new testimony, each financial record traced, they moved closer to bringing down the entire network. What they didn't know was that their investigation had not gone unnoticed. Even as they built their case, the hospital's allies were preparing their own response. The next attack wouldn't be as direct as the first, it would be subtle, legal, and potentially more devastating than any physical confrontation. In the midst of their investigation, life at the mansion settled into an unexpected rhythm. The mornings began with the twins' early cries, bringing the household to life in ways the grand building had never known. Adam, who had once rushed straight to his office, now lingered over breakfast, watching Amanda with the babies, his normally guarded expression softening with each passing day. "You're good with them," Amanda said one morning, finding him in the nursery gently rocking Lucas back to sleep. The businessman who once ruled Seattle's real estate empire now spent his evenings learning to change diapers and warm bottles. "They make it easy," Adam replied softly, his eyes never leaving the baby's face. "They don't care about quarterly reports or profit margins. They just trust." Their relationship evolved in quiet moments, shared glances over the twins' heads, hands brushing while passing bottles, late-night conversations when the babies finally slept. Adam found himself opening up about Catherine, his lost love, while Amanda shared stories of her parents, memories she hadn't allowed herself to revisit in years. Meanwhile, Caleb and Nicole's dynamic took a different path. Their initial suspicion of each other had transformed into something more complex. They worked late into the night, poring over documents, their professional focus occasionally broken by moments of unexpected connection. "Why did you really turn against them?" Caleb asked one evening, watching Nicole organize case files. "You had everything to lose." Nicole paused, considering her words carefully. "I spent years justifying what we did, telling myself we were finding better homes for these children. But watching Amanda with the twins, seeing what real love looks like." She met his eyes. "Some things are worth losing everything for." Their attraction was complicated by guilt and trust issues, but undeniable. Caleb found himself drawn to her determination to make amends, while Nicole discovered in him a moral certainty she had long forgotten existed. The mansion itself seemed to transform. Rooms that had been pristine but lifeless now echoed with the twins' laughter. The formal dining room became a makeshift office where they gathered to work, baby bottles mixed with legal documents on the antique table. Mrs. Chen moved through the house like a guardian angel, caring for the twins while somehow keeping everyone fed and the household running smoothly. One rainy evening, Adam found Amanda in the library, fast asleep in an armchair with both twins nestled against her chest. Instead of waking her, he carefully draped a blanket over them, his hand lingering on her shoulder. The simple domesticity of the moment struck him with unexpected force. This was what he had been missing all these years. "You love them," Nicole observed quietly, having witnessed the scene. "Not just the twins, her too." Adam didn't deny it. "I didn't think I could, after Catherine. I thought that part of me died with her." Nicole understood transformation better than most. She watched Caleb with his sister and nephews, saw how his hardened exterior melted when Logan grabbed his finger or Lucas smiled at him. The man who had spent years pursuing justice was learning to pursue happiness as well. The relationships within the household became more intricate, more meaningful. Amanda and Nicole formed an unexpected friendship, bonding over late-night feedings and shared determination to protect the twins. Caleb found himself seeking Adam's counsel not just on security matters, but on personal ones as well. Even Mrs. Chen became more than just a housekeeper. Her quiet wisdom and unconditional support made her an essential part of their growing family. She taught Amanda old Chinese lullabies, showed Adam how to properly swaddle the twins, and somehow always knew when someone needed a cup of tea and a sympathetic ear. But love blooming in the shadow of danger carried its own complications. Each tender moment was tinged with the knowledge that it could be disrupted at any time. Every laugh shared over dinner might be interrupted by another threat. The joy of watching the twins grow was tempered by the constant need to protect them. Yet somehow these constraints only made their bonds stronger. They learned to cherish the quiet moments, to find strength in their growing connections. Amanda and Adam's relationship deepened into something neither had expected to find. Caleb and Nicole's complicated attraction evolved into mutual respect and understanding with the potential for more. They were becoming more than just allies in a fight against corruption. They were becoming a family, bound together by love, trust, and shared purpose. What none of them realized was that this foundation would soon be tested in ways they couldn't imagine, as their enemies prepared to strike at the very heart of their newfound happiness. The first warning came in the form of a letter, innocuous looking among Adam's morning mail but carrying a message that made his blood run cold. Inside was a single photograph of Amanda and the twins in the mansion's garden, taken from outside the property walls. On the back, written in precise handwriting, children belong with their rightful parents. "They're watching us," Caleb said grimly, examining the photo with professional scrutiny. "This wasn't taken by amateurs. They've got professional surveillance on the house." The threats escalated quickly. Amanda's former colleagues at Seattle Memorial began receiving anonymous tips about her mental state. Child Protective Services received calls expressing concern about the twins' welfare. Each move was calculated, designed to build a legal case for removing the babies from her care. Nicole recognized the strategy all too well. "This is how they usually start," she explained during an emergency meeting in Adam's study. "They'll build a paper trail, create doubt about her fitness as a mother. Then when they make their move, everything will look legitimate." The pressure came from all directions. Adam's business competitors suddenly received anonymous information about irregularities in his recent deals. Building inspectors appeared at his construction sites, finding violations that had never been issues before. Board members started receiving calls questioning his judgment, suggesting his involvement with Amanda showed mental instability. Caleb found his law enforcement contacts growing distant, his usual sources of information drying up. His reputation, built over years of dedicated service, was being quietly undermined. Whispers spread about his reliability, his judgment, his loyalties. Even Mrs. Chen wasn't immune. Her daughter in San Francisco called in tears someone had threatened her job, mentioned her mother's involvement with criminals. The message was clear: no one connected to them was safe. The hospital's network proved more extensive than they had imagined. Every attempt to gather official support was blocked. Journalists who showed interest in the story suddenly backed off. Law enforcement investigations stalled. Politicians who had initially expressed concern about adoption fraud found other issues to focus on. "They're trying to isolate us," Nicole observed, watching another potential ally withdraw their support, cut us off from any help, make us look crazy for even suggesting there's a conspiracy. The twins, now 3 months old, remained blissfully unaware of the growing danger. Lucas had learned to smile, his whole face lighting up when Adam entered the room. Logan was more serious, but his eyes followed Amanda everywhere she went. Their normal development, their obvious bond with their mother, stood in stark contrast to the picture their enemies were trying to paint. One morning, Amanda found her nursing license had been suspended pending investigation. The charges were vague, damaging accusations of drug theft, patient neglect, mental instability. Her years of exemplary service meant nothing against the carefully crafted narrative of an unstable woman who had stolen her own children. "They're building their case," Nicole warned, reviewing the suspension notice. "They'll use this to question your fitness as a mother. We need to be ready." Adam responded by hiring the best medical malpractice lawyers in Seattle, but even they faced unexpected obstacles. Records disappeared, witnesses changed their stories, evidence that could clear Amanda mysteriously vanished. The pressure began to show on all of them. Amanda barely slept, jumping at every sound. Adam worked tirelessly to protect his business interests while trying to maintain the facade of normalcy. Caleb's frustration grew as each lead hit a dead end, while Nicole grappled with guilt over her past role in similar operations. Then came the photos of Caleb and Nicole together, sent to key people in the hospital's network. The message was clear: she had betrayed them, and both would pay the price. Nicole's professional reputation, already precarious, was systematically destroyed. Law firms that might have hired her received anonymous warnings. Her bank accounts were frozen for suspicious activity. But instead of breaking them, the pressure forged them into a stronger unit. Adam's protective instincts extended beyond Amanda and the twins to encompass their entire makeshift family. Caleb's determination to protect his sister only grew with each new threat. Nicole's insider knowledge became their greatest asset in anticipating their enemies' moves. What their opponents didn't understand was that every attack made their resolve stronger. Each attempt to break them only reinforced their commitment to protecting the twins and exposing the truth. They were no longer fighting just for themselves, they were fighting for every family that had been torn apart by this corrupt system. The breakthrough they had been waiting for came from an unexpected source. Late one night, as Nicole was reviewing yet another set of hospital records, she noticed a pattern in the financial documentation that had somehow been overlooked. The numbers didn't just tell a story of corruption, they revealed an entire shadow accounting system. "Look at this," she called to the others, spreading documents across Adam's desk. "Every adoption has two sets of records. One for official review, showing standard fees and procedures. But there's a second layer: hidden payments, offshore accounts, money flowing through shell companies." Adam leaned in, his business acumen catching details others might miss. These shell companies, they're all registered to the same addresses. And look at the dates, they align perfectly with the construction contracts for the new hospital wing. The evidence was damning. Dr. Henderson's careful notes revealed a systematic process for identifying vulnerable mothers. Medical records were altered, psychiatric evaluations fabricated, and court orders rushed through a network of corrupt judges. Each baby had a price, carefully calculated based on factors like health, appearance, and family background. Caleb's law enforcement experience helped them map the entire network. "It's not just Seattle Memorial," he explained, pinning photos and documents to a board. "They have connections in 5 other hospitals across the state. Each one operates the same way, targeting vulnerable mothers, fabricating reasons to declare them unfit, then selling their babies to wealthy clients." The list of involved parties stunned them. Judge Carson had received millions in offshore payments for expediting adoptions. Detective Brooks owned several luxury properties purchased through the hospital's shell companies. Even respected child welfare advocates were on the payroll, paid to look the other way. Amanda's hands shook as she read through Dr. Henderson's private notes about her own case. "They had this plan from the moment I reported the first irregularity. They were going to declare me mentally unstable, take the twins, and sell them to the Matthews family for $1.5 million. The evidence needed to be released carefully, strategically. Nicole knew from experience how skilled the hospital was at burying scandals. "We need to make it impossible for them to hide this," she insisted. Multiple media outlets, law enforcement agencies, oversight committees all at once. They worked through the night, preparing packages of evidence. Adam's business contacts provided introductions to journalists who couldn't be bought. Caleb reached out to federal investigators he trusted. Nicole organized the legal documentation into airtight cases that even corrupt judges couldn't dismiss. The story broke like a tsunami. Multiple news outlets released detailed exposes simultaneously. Federal agents raided Seattle Memorial and 5 other hospitals. Judge Carson was photographed being led from his courthouse in handcuffs. Dr. Henderson's carefully maintained facade cracked under questioning, leading to a full confession. The public reaction was immediate and overwhelming. Protesters gathered outside Seattle Memorial. Former victims came forward with their stories. Politicians who had once protected the hospital now scrambled to distance themselves from the scandal. Dr. Morrison attempted damage control, calling a press conference to deny everything. But halfway through his prepared statement, Nicole released a recording of him discussing prices for premium babies with wealthy clients. The hospital board forced his resignation within hours. The evidence trail led to unexpected places. Society figures who had adopted through Seattle Memorial faced uncomfortable questions about what they knew. Corporate donors who had helped launder the proceeds saw their stock prices plummet. Law firms that had processed the fraudulent adoptions faced disbarment proceedings. But the most powerful impact came from the victim stories. Mothers who had lost their children began coming forward. Immigrants, teenagers, women in abusive relationships, all targeted because they were vulnerable. Their testimonies painted a picture of systematic exploitation that shocked even hardened investigators. Mrs. Chen's daughter proved to be a crucial witness. Her testimony about her own experience with the hospital's adoption program years ago helped establish the long-running nature of the scheme. Other hospital staff, freed from fear of retaliation, began sharing what they had seen. The exposure brought both vindication and new dangers. The network's wealthy clients, facing possible criminal charges, became desperate. The corrupt officials, seeing their careers crumbling, had nothing left to lose. Amanda and the twins needed protection more than ever, but now they had the world watching. As the hospital scandal exploded across national headlines, the personal cost to those involved became increasingly apparent. The Matthews family, the wealthy couple who had arranged to purchase the twins, launched a vicious legal battle for custody. Their lawsuit painted Amanda as an unstable nurse who had kidnapped her own children, while presenting themselves as victims who had acted in good faith with the hospital's adoption program. "They're claiming they already paid a deposit for the twins," Nicole explained during an emergency meeting. $500,000 transferred to one of the hospital's offshore accounts. They're arguing this creates a binding contract. Amanda's grip on the twins tightened as she listened. Lucas and Logan, now 4 months old, were beginning to show distinct personalities. Lucas was the observer, taking in everything with serious eyes, while Logan was more outgoing, always reaching for people he recognized. The thought of losing them to people who had tried to buy them like merchandise made her physically ill. Adam's business empire came under sustained attack. The Matthews family had powerful connections, and suddenly his company faced multiple regulatory investigations. Building permits were revoked, contracts cancelled, and longtime business partners began distancing themselves. "They're trying to bankrupt me," Adam admitted late one night after reviewing the latest financial reports. "If they succeed, we lose the security team, the safe house, everything we need to protect the twins." But it was his next words that revealed how much had changed. "Let them try. Money can be rebuilt. This family can't be replaced." Caleb faced his own battles. His law enforcement career was effectively over, his reputation tarnished by false accusations of evidence tampering and witness intimidation. Former colleagues avoided him, and sources stopped returning his calls. The brotherhood he had dedicated his life to had turned its back on him. "I'd do it all again," he told Nicole during one of their late-night strategy sessions. 20 years of service means nothing compared to protecting my sister and those babies." Nicole's professional destruction was perhaps the most complete. Her role in exposing the trafficking ring had made her a pariah in legal circles. Law firms blacklisted her, judges refused to hear cases with her name attached, and her bank accounts remained frozen. The careful construction of her life lay in ruins around her. The Matthews family's lawsuit forced them to relive every detail of the twins' birth and escape. Amanda had to testify about that night, describing her terror as she fled the hospital with her newborns. Medical records were scrutinized, her mental health questioned, every decision she had made put under hostile examination. "They're trying to break us," she whispered to Adam after a particularly brutal day in court. "Make us too exhausted to fight." Adam's response was to pull her and the twins closer. "Then we'll carry each other. You're not alone anymore." Mrs. Chen became another target. Immigration officials suddenly discovered irregularities in her decades-old citizenship application. Her daughter in San Francisco lost her job after anonymous complaints. The message was clear: everyone connected to the case would suffer. Even the twins seemed to sense the tension. They became fussy, more clingy, as if aware of the forces trying to tear their family apart. Their developmental milestones, first laughs, rolling over, reaching for toys, became precious victories in the midst of battle, moments of joy they clung to. The pressure took its toll in different ways. Amanda lost weight, dark circles forming under her eyes as she fought to protect her children. Adam worked through the nights, trying to salvage his business while funding their legal defense. Caleb's protective instincts went into overdrive, checking and rechecking security measures until Nicole forced him to rest. Yet somehow the persecution had an unexpected effect. Instead of breaking them, it fused them closer together. Adam's feelings for Amanda deepened from protection to profound love. Caleb and Nicole's professional partnership evolved into something more personal, their shared battle creating an unshakable bond. The twins became the heart of this makeshift family. Their daily growth, their innocent trust, reminded everyone what they were fighting for. They weren't just protecting two babies from traffickers, they were defending the very idea of family, of love over money, of right over might. Nicole sat alone in her apartment, staring at the burner phone that had just delivered a message she had been dreading. "Doctor." Henderson's contacts had reached out with an offer, testified that she had fabricated the evidence against the hospital, claimed she had manipulated documents out of revenge for being passed over for promotion, and all her problems would disappear. Her frozen accounts would be restored, her legal career salvaged, and she would receive enough money to start a new life anywhere she wanted. The alternative was implied, but clear: continue supporting Amanda and face not just professional ruin but criminal charges. They had enough manufactured evidence to paint her as the mastermind behind the hospital's illegal operations, a corrupt lawyer who had orchestrated the entire scheme for profit. Her hands shook as she poured another glass of wine. On her coffee table lay photos from the past few months: Logan grabbing her finger with his tiny hand, Caleb smiling at her over case files, Amanda trusting her with the twins during late-night feedings. When had these people become more than just clients? When had their fight become her redemption? When a text from Caleb lit up her phone, the twins rolled over today, both at the same time. "Wish you'd been here to see it." Such a simple message, but it made her heart ache. She had watched those babies grow, seen their personalities emerge. The thought of betraying them made her physically ill. The next morning brought another reminder of what she stood to lose. The Matthews legal team had subpoenaed her for deposition, planning to use her past involvement with the hospital's adoption program to discredit everything she had revealed. Her testimony could either save or destroy Amanda's case. They're going to ask about every adoption I ever handled, she confessed to Caleb during their morning strategy session. Every document I processed, every legal shortcut I took. They'll use my own actions to justify what they tried to do to Amanda. Caleb studied her face, seeing the torment behind her professional mask. You're not that person anymore, Nicole. You chose to fight with us. But had she changed enough? The weight of her past decisions pressed down on her. How many other mothers had lost their children because of paperwork she had processed? How many families had been torn apart with her legal blessing? The decision came to a head during a quiet moment with the twins. Amanda had asked her to watch them while she got some much-needed rest, trusting her completely with her most precious treasures. Logan fell asleep in her arms, his tiny hand clutching her blouse, while Lucas watched her with those solemn eyes that seemed to see straight through her. I used to think I was just doing my job, she whispered to their sleeping forms, following the law, serving my clients. When did I stop seeing the humanity in what we were doing? But the hospital's deadline for their offer loomed. Each hour brought new pressure, hints of evidence about to surface, suggestions of criminal investigations, reminders of just how much she had to lose. Her professional reputation, her financial security, her very freedom hung in the balance. But there was something else at stake now, something she had thought lost long ago: her soul. The person she had become since joining Amanda's fight, the woman Caleb looked at with respect and growing affection, the ally these babies trusted. Could she sacrifice all that to save herself? The answer came during a family dinner at the mansion. Watching Adam and Amanda with the twins, seeing Caleb's protective presence, feeling Mrs. Chen's quiet support, she realized she had finally found what she had spent her career helping to destroy: a real family bound by love and choice rather than law and blood. That night she made her decision. She gathered every document, every record, every piece of evidence she had kept from her time working with the hospital. She organized it all, adding detailed annotations explaining how the trafficking operation really worked. Then she called a press conference. Standing before the cameras, she did more than just reject the hospital's offer. She confessed to her own role in their operations, provided proof of their bribery attempt, and publicly pledged her support to Amanda and the twins. It was professional suicide and possibly a path to prison, but for the first time in her career, she felt truly free. The betrayal came from the most unexpected source. Sarah, Amanda's aunt who had disappeared with her years ago, suddenly emerged as a key witness for the Matthews family. Her testimony in court sent shockwaves through their carefully built defense. Amanda has always been unstable, Sarah declared under oath, her voice steady as she delivered each calculated blow. After her parents died, she became obsessed with conspiracy theories. She would see threats everywhere, imagine people were plotting against her. I had to leave her for my own safety. Amanda sat frozen in the courtroom, each word a knife to her heart. This was the woman who had raised her after her parents' death, who had held her through nightmares, who had promised to always protect her. Now she was methodically destroying everything Amanda had fought to protect. She's lying, Caleb whispered furiously, his hand gripping the courtroom barrier until his knuckles turned white. She knows what really happened. She knows why I had to leave. But Sarah's betrayal went deeper than just testimony. She produced documents, letters Amanda had supposedly written, showing increasingly paranoid thoughts, medical records suggesting a family history of mental illness, even childhood diaries, carefully edited to paint a picture of a troubled girl who had grown into an unstable woman. The impact was devastating. The judge, who had been leaning in their favor, now looked at Amanda with obvious concern. The Matthews lawyers pounced on every detail, weaving Sarah's testimony into their narrative of a mentally unstable nurse who had stolen her own babies in a fit of paranoid delusion. Back at the mansion, Amanda finally broke down. Why, she sobbed, clutching Logan while Adam held Lucas. She was like a mother to me. She knew everything, how they threatened me, how they tried to take the twins. Why would she do this? The answer came from Nicole's investigation. Sarah's sudden wealth, carefully hidden in offshore accounts. Regular payments from companies linked to the hospital's network. A new house in Phoenix, purchased through one of the Matthews shell corporations. Her aunt hadn't just betrayed her, she had sold her out. They got to her years ago, Caleb realized, piecing together the timeline. That's why she disappeared with Amanda when I tried to find them. They were already controlling her then. The betrayal had far-reaching consequences. Other witnesses began to question their memories. Hospital staff who had supported Amanda's version of events suddenly became less certain. The carefully constructed case began to show cracks. Even worse was the impact on Amanda herself. Sarah's testimony had awakened old wounds, made her question everything about her past. Had she imagined the danger at the hospital? Was she really protecting her babies? Or was she, as Sarah suggested, living out a paranoid fantasy? Adam found her late one night, sitting in the nursery, watching the twins sleep. "I know what they're trying to do," he said softly, kneeling beside her chair. "They want you to doubt yourself. But I've seen you with Lucas and Logan. I've watched you fight for them. That's not delusion, that's love." Caleb struggled with his own guilt. "I should have tried harder to find you," he told Amanda. "If I had, Sarah would never have been able to do this." But it was Nicole who found a way to turn the betrayal to their advantage. "Sarah's testimony isn't just cruel, it's too perfect," she explained. "Every detail fits the hospital's narrative too neatly. No real person remembers things that conveniently." They began to dig into Sarah's past, following the money trail. Each discovery revealed more about how the hospital's network operated, how they identified and compromised people close to their targets. Sarah wasn't just a betrayer, she was evidence of how deep the corruption went. The twins, now 5 months old, remained blissfully unaware of the drama unfolding around them. They continued to grow, to smile, to reach for their mother with complete trust. Their innocence became both a wound and a blessing, a reminder of what Sarah had tried to destroy, and why they had to keep fighting. The attack came on what should have been a day of triumph. They had just left the courthouse after finally exposing Sarah's financial connections to the hospital network. Amanda was carrying Logan, while Adam held Lucas, their small victory celebration cut short by the sound of screeching tires. 2 black SUVs converged on them as they approached their car. Men in dark suits emerged, moving with military precision. Caleb, several steps ahead, spotted the threat first. "Get down," he shouted, but it was already too late. Adam saw the glint of metal first, his business instincts, honed by years of high-stakes negotiations, instantly recognizing the moment when everything changes. Without hesitation, he handed Lucas to Nicole and threw himself in front of Amanda and Logan just as the first shot rang out. The impact threw him backward, a burning sensation spreading across his chest. Time seemed to slow as he fell, his mind registering disconnected details: Amanda's scream, Logan's startled cry, the chaos erupting around them. Security guards and police officers converged on the scene, but Adam's world had narrowed to a single thought: keeping Amanda and the twins safe. Amanda's voice seemed to come from far away. He tried to focus on her face as she knelt beside him, still clutching Logan protectively. Blood was spreading across his expensive suit, the same suit he had worn to countless board meetings. How oddly fitting that it would serve its final purpose, protecting something far more valuable than any business deal. The next hours were a blur of emergency rooms and surgery. The bullet had missed his heart by inches, but the damage was severe. As doctors fought to save his life, Amanda refused to leave his side. The twins kept safe under Caleb and Nicole's protection in a secured hospital room. In his moments of consciousness, Adam made his final arrangements. "Everything goes to them," he told his lawyers, his voice weak but determined. "The company, the properties, all of it. Amanda and the twins get everything." The news of Seattle's most prominent businessman taking a bullet to protect a nurse and her baby made headlines. The public narrative began to shift dramatically. What kind of woman would inspire such sacrifice? What truth was worth dying for? But in the private moments when it was just Amanda sitting beside his hospital bed, different truths emerged. "I never told you," Adam whispered during one lucid moment, "about the night I lost Catherine. I was working late, as usual. If I had been there..." Amanda held his hand, understanding the weight of old guilt mixing with present pain. "You were there this time," she said softly. "You saved us." The twins, too young to understand, still sensed the gravity of the situation. During the brief moments when the doctors allowed them to visit, they were unusually quiet. Lucas would stare at Adam with solemn eyes, while Logan would reach for him with tiny hands, as if trying to pull him back to health through sheer baby determination. Days turned into weeks. Adam's condition remained critical, hovering between life and death. The business empire he had built began to show cracks as news of his condition affected stock prices and business deals. But for the first time in his life, Adam was completely unconcerned with business matters. In his fevered dreams he saw Catherine, but instead of the guilt-ridden nightmares that had haunted him for years, she was smiling, approving. "You finally found your way back to love," she seemed to say. "Don't let go." The turning point came 1 month after the shooting. Adam opened his eyes to find Amanda asleep in the chair beside his bed, Logan cushioned safely in her arms while Lucas slept in a portable crib nearby. The sight gave him something his wealth never had a reason to fight, to heal, to live. Recovery was a slow, painful process, learning to walk again, rebuilding his strength, fighting through the pain. Each step was a battle. But unlike his previous battles in boardrooms and business deals, this fight had a different purpose. Every painful step brought him closer to being able to hold the twins again, to standing beside Amanda, to protecting the family he had unexpectedly found. While Adam fought for his life in the hospital, another devastating truth emerged. Nicole's investigation into Sarah's past uncovered a painful secret that would shake Amanda to her core. Their mother hadn't died in a simple car accident as they'd been told. She had been killed while investigating the same hospital network, her accident carefully orchestrated to look natural. She was getting close to exposing them, Caleb explained, his voice breaking as he showed Amanda the police reports he'd finally obtained. She noticed patterns in her work as a social worker. Children disappearing, mothers declared unfit. She was building a case. The revelation hit Amanda like a physical blow. All these years she'd carried guilt over her mother's death, believing she had been distracted by worry over her daughter's supposed mental state. Now she learned that her mother had died trying to stop the very people who were threatening her grandchildren. She knew, Amanda whispered, clutching the old police reports. She was trying to protect other mothers just like I was, and they killed her for it. The weight of this truth, combined with Adam's critical condition and the ongoing custody battle, pushed Amanda to her breaking point. She stopped eating, barely slept, going through the motions of caring for the twins while drowning in grief and guilt. One night after putting the twins to bed, she found herself in Adam's study, surrounded by the evidence of their fight against the hospital. Photos of other mothers who had lost their children, documentation of the trafficking network, records of lives destroyed by the same people who had killed her mother. "I can't do this anymore," she sobbed to Nicole, who found her there. "Everything I touch gets destroyed. Mom died because she tried to fight them. Adam might die. The twins would be safer with someone else, someone they're not hunting." Nicole, usually composed, felt her own eyes fill with tears. "That's what they want you to think. They want you to give up, to believe their lies about you being unfit. But look at Lucas and Logan. Look how they light up when they see you. That's real. That's worth fighting for." But the darkness was overwhelming. Amanda began to have nightmares reliving her mother's accident, seeing Adam falling, imagining the twins being taken away. She would wake up gasping, rushing to check on her babies, terrified that each moment with them might be her last. But Caleb, watching his sister crumble, felt helpless. "I failed Mom," he confessed to Nicole one night. "I failed Amanda. I keep trying to protect them, and I keep failing." The twins, sensing their mother's distress, became fussy and clingy. Lucas would cry whenever Amanda left his sight, while Logan's normally sunny personality turned subdued. Their distress only added to Amanda's guilt, creating a cycle of pain that seemed impossible to break. Mrs. Chen, witnessing Amanda's spiral, took action in her own way. She began leaving old Chinese proverbs around the house, words about strength and perseverance written in both Chinese and English. She made sure Amanda ate, bringing soups and teas that she claimed were for healing the heart. But the turning point came from an unexpected source. While visiting Adam in the hospital, Amanda ran into one of her former patients, Maria, whose baby the hospital had tried to take. Maria was there with her son, now a healthy toddler, because she had fought back, inspired by Amanda's example. "You showed me it was possible to fight them," Maria said, hugging Amanda fiercely. "You gave me the courage to keep my baby. You're not just fighting for your twins, you're fighting for all of us." That night, sitting between the twins' cribs, Amanda finally let herself feel everything: the grief for her mother, the fear for Adam, the rage at the system that had tried to destroy so many families. But mixed with the pain was something else: determination. "Your grandmother was a hero," she whispered to her sleeping babies. "She died trying to protect mothers and their children. I won't let that be for nothing. I won't let them win." The next morning, Amanda walked into the mansion's makeshift war room with new purpose. She picked up her mother's old case files, seeing them with fresh eyes. She left us a roadmap, she told Caleb and Nicole. She found something they didn't want exposed. We need to finish what she started. The moment of truth arrived in the courtroom, where the Matthews family's lawyers had called Nicole as their star witness. The tension was palpable as she took the stand, every eye in the room fixed on the woman who had once been the hospital's most trusted legal advisor. "Ms. Parker," the Matthews attorney began, his voice dripping with false courtesy, "please tell the court about your role in Seattle Memorial's adoption program." Nicole took a deep breath, her eyes meeting Amanda's across the courtroom. The twins were with Mrs. Chen in the gallery, Lucas watching with his usual solemn expression, while Logan squirmed in the caregiver's arms. This was the moment everything would either fall apart or come together. "I'm going to tell you about my role," she said clearly, "but not the way you want me to." She pulled out a thick folder that even the hospital's lawyers hadn't seen. "This is every case I handled for Seattle Memorial. Every mother I helped rob of her children. Every baby I helped sell to the highest bidder." The courtroom erupted in chaos. The Matthews lawyers jumped to their feet, objecting frantically. The judge called for order, but Nicole continued, her voice steady and determined. "For 5 years, I crafted the legal framework that made stealing babies look legitimate. I created the documents, I found the loopholes, I made sure everything appeared legal on paper, and I did it so well that no one ever questioned why certain mothers were deemed unfit. Why their babies disappeared into a system designed to profit from their loss." She began naming names: judges who had accepted bribes, officials who had looked the other way, wealthy families who had knowingly purchased stolen children. With each revelation, she provided documented proof, evidence she had collected and hidden throughout her years working for the hospital. "I'm not here to defend my actions," she continued, her voice cracking slightly. "I'm here to make them right. Every case, every child, every mother, I remember them all. Their faces haunt my dreams. But Amanda Mitchell and her twins, they gave me a chance to change, to fight for what's right instead of what's profitable." The Matthews lawyers tried to paint her as a disgruntled employee seeking revenge, but Nicole was prepared. She produced recordings of conversations, copies of transactions, details that only someone deep inside the operation would know. "You offered me money to lie today," she said, looking directly at the Matthews legal team. "Just like you offered Sarah Henderson money to betray her niece. Just like you've been buying people's silence for years. But some things can't be bought, like the love of a mother for her children." As she spoke, more evidence was being delivered to the FBI, the state attorney's office, and selected journalists. Everything she had gathered over years of working within the system, every piece of evidence she had carefully preserved, was now being released in a flood that would wash away the corruption she had once helped maintain. The personal cost was enormous. By the end of her testimony, Nicole had effectively ended her legal career. She faced potential criminal charges, civil lawsuits, and professional ruin. But watching Amanda hold her twins, seeing the truth finally emerge, she felt a weight lift from her soul. Outside the courtroom, Caleb waited for her. "That was the bravest thing I've ever seen," he said softly. "Or the most foolish," she replied, managing a weak smile. "I'll probably end up in prison." "We'll fight that battle together," he promised, taking her hand, "just like we've fought everything else." The aftermath was immediate and far-reaching. The hospital's network began to crumble as those implicated rushed to make deals with prosecutors. Mothers who had lost their children years ago began to come forward, armed with new hope of finding their stolen babies. That evening, in Adam's hospital room, Nicole sat with the family she had chosen over everything else. Amanda held Lucas while Adam, still weak but improving, cradled Logan. Caleb stood protectively nearby while Mrs. Chen brought them all tea. "I should have done this years ago," Nicole said quietly, watching the twins play with Adam's hospital blanket. "How many families could I have saved?" "You saved us," Amanda replied simply. "And through us, you'll help save others. That's what matters now." The fall of Seattle Memorial happened with stunning swiftness. FBI agents swarmed the hospital at dawn, their raid coordinated with similar operations at 5 other hospitals across the state. Dr. Henderson was led out in handcuffs, her carefully maintained professional facade crumbling as cameras captured her arrest. Dr. Morrison attempted to flee but was caught at the Canadian border, carrying documents that only provided more evidence of the trafficking operation. The scene at the hospital was chaos. Nurses and staff who had been innocent of wrongdoing stood shocked as agents seized computers and files. In the maternity ward, where so many mothers had lost their children, investigators discovered hidden cameras and recording equipment used to gather material for blackmail. "Look at this," Caleb said, reviewing the seized documents with Nicole and Amanda. They kept detailed records of every transaction. Prices for babies based on hair color, eye color, ethnicity. They treated them like inventory. The hospital's pristine reputation shattered as evidence mounted. Judge Carson, facing multiple federal charges, began cooperating with prosecutors. His testimony revealed a network of corruption that stretched from hospital administrators to state officials. Detective Brooks, confronted with evidence of his involvement, chose to end his life rather than face justice. But the most damning evidence came from the mothers themselves. Women began arriving at the FBI's temporary command center, carrying years of pain and now, finally, hope. Each had a story of pressure, of threats, of having their children stolen through a combination of legal manipulation and outright coercion. Maria Rodriguez, Amanda's former patient, became a powerful voice for the victims. "They told me I was unfit," she testified before a grand jury. "They said if I fought them, they would report me to immigration. But Amanda showed me we could fight back. She gave us all courage." The Matthews family's carefully constructed public image crumbled under scrutiny. Financial records revealed their knowledge of the trafficking scheme, including payments made long before the twins were born. Their other adopted children were discovered to have similar stories, all taken from vulnerable mothers through the hospital's program. Adam, watching the news from his hospital bed, saw his business instincts validated. The new wing construction project, which had first raised his suspicions, was revealed to be a massive money laundering operation. Every concrete pour had hidden cash transactions, every steel beam represented another stolen child. Dr. Henderson's private files proved especially revealing. She had kept meticulous records of her talent scouting detailed assessments of potential target mothers, complete with psychological weaknesses to exploit and pressure points to manipulate. Amanda's file showed how they had planned her takedown from the moment she first questioned their practices. The hospital board members who had profited from the scheme faced their own reckonings. Some tried to claim ignorance, others attempted to shift blame, but the paper trail was undeniable. The prestigious institution they had built on stolen lives began to collapse under the weight of truth. Sarah, Amanda's aunt, tried to recant her testimony, claiming she had been coerced, but her offshore accounts told a different story. Each payment lined up perfectly with a child successfully taken and placed with wealthy buyers. Her betrayal had been calculated and prolonged. For Amanda, watching the hospital's destruction brought complicated emotions. These were halls she had walked for years, colleagues she had trusted, a place where she had once believed she was helping people. Now, every corner held memories of corruption, every familiar face masked potential betrayal. The FBI's investigation expanded beyond Seattle. Similar operations were discovered in hospitals across the country, each following the same pattern, targeting vulnerable mothers, fabricating reasons to declare them unfit, selling their children to wealthy clients willing to pay for clean adoptions. Mrs. Chen's daughter emerged as a key witness, her testimony helping to establish the long-running nature of the scheme. Her own experience years ago had been one of the first cases, setting the pattern for hundreds that would follow. The final blow came when the hospital's encrypted files were cracked. Inside lay the complete financial records of every transaction, every bribe, every payoff. The scope of the corruption was staggering: hundreds of millions of dollars, thousands of affected families, decades of systematic exploitation. The final hearing took place on a bright autumn morning, 6 months after Nicole's dramatic testimony. The courthouse steps were crowded with families' mothers who had lost children, children who had been stolen, all waiting to hear the verdict that would set a precedent for hundreds of similar cases across the country. Amanda sat in the front row, Lucas and Logan, now 10 months old, dressed in matching blue outfits that Mrs. Chen had carefully selected. Adam, still moving carefully from his injuries but determined to be present, sat beside them. Caleb and Nicole occupied the seats directly behind, their hands clasped together in silent support. Judge Matthews, specially appointed from another district to ensure impartiality, addressed the packed courtroom. "In all my years on the bench," she began, "I have never seen a case that so thoroughly exposed the corruption of those entrusted with protecting our most vulnerable citizens." The verdict was comprehensive. The Matthews family's custody claim was dismissed with prejudice. Dr. Henderson, Dr. Morrison, and their accomplices faced lengthy prison sentences. The hospital's assets were frozen to be used for restitution to the families they had destroyed. But the judge wasn't finished. M.S. Mitchell. She continued, looking directly at Amanda, "This court owes you an apology. You were not only right about the corruption at Seattle Memorial, but your actions in exposing it, at great personal risk, have saved countless other families from similar tragedy." As the judge spoke, Logan reached for Adam, who had become as much a father to the twins as if they shared his blood. Lucas, ever observant, watched the proceedings with a solemnity that seemed beyond his months. They were too young to understand the significance of this moment, but someday they would know the story of how their mother's courage had changed the lives of so many. Outside the courthouse, surrounded by celebrating families, Amanda finally allowed herself to feel the full weight of their victory. Her mother's death had been avenged. The truth about Sarah's betrayal had been exposed. Most importantly, her children were safe, protected by a family forged in the fire of their shared struggle. "We did it," she whispered, looking at the people who had become her strength. Adam, who had risked everything, including his life, to protect them. Caleb, the brother who had found his way back to her. Nicole, who had chosen redemption over safety. Mrs. Chen, whose quiet wisdom had held them together through the darkest times. The aftermath brought unexpected blessings. The evidence Nicole had gathered led to reunions between mothers and their stolen children, some separated for years. The hospital's records, meticulously kept in their arrogance, became a roadmap for healing broken families. Adam's recovery progressed steadily, each day bringing him closer to full strength. The time in the hospital had changed him, stripped away the last of his corporate armor. When he finally came home, it was to a house filled with the sounds of babies laughing, of family gathering, of love growing stronger each day. Caleb and Nicole's relationship, born in crisis and tested by fire, deepened into something neither had expected to find. Their shared battle for justice had created a bond that transcended their professional partnership. They began planning a future together, one that included being a permanent part of the twins' lives. Mrs. Chen, who had been more than just a housekeeper through it all, formally became part of the family when Adam insisted on putting the mansion in a trust for the twins, with her as one of the trustees. Her daughter, finally free from the shadow of her past trauma, moved back to Seattle to be closer to her mother. The twins thrived, growing stronger each day, surrounded by more love than Amanda had ever dreamed possible. Lucas remained the thoughtful observer, while Logan's infectious laugh filled the house with joy. They would grow up knowing the story of how their family came to be, understanding that love is stronger than blood and courage can overcome any obstacle. One evening, as they gathered for dinner, a tradition that had become sacred in their household, Amanda looked around the table at her unlikely family. Adam cutting up food for the twins, Caleb and Nicole discussing plans for their new legal advocacy group, Mrs. Chen bringing out her special dumplings that the babies had come to love. This, she thought, is what victory really looks like. Not just justice in a courtroom, but love around a dinner table. 1 year after the trial's conclusion, the family gathered in front of a sprawling craftsman house on Seattle's outskirts. The property, nestled among towering evergreens with a view of the Sound, represented more than just a change of address. It was a fresh start, chosen together as a family. "It's perfect," Amanda said, watching Lucas and Logan, now walking confidently on their own at 15 months, explore the wraparound porch. The mansion had served its purpose as a fortress during their darkest days, but this house was different. This was a home designed for laughter, for growing, for healing. Adam had insisted on letting Amanda choose the property, understanding her need to make this decision for their family. The house was smaller than his mansion but warmer, with large windows that filled every room with natural light. The backyard sloped gently down to a small stream, perfect for future adventures. The security system is state-of-the-art, Caleb confirmed, his protective instincts still sharp despite the passing of danger. But it's discreet. The kids can grow up feeling safe without feeling watched. Mrs. Chen had already claimed the kitchen as her domain, its modern appliances and spacious layout perfect for teaching the twins her traditional recipes as they grew older. The herb garden she planned would complement the vegetable patches Amanda wanted to plant. Each room held promise. The twins' bedrooms adjoined through a Jack and Jill bathroom, allowing them the connection they craved while beginning to develop independence. The library, with its built-in shelves and window seats, would hold not just books but the documented history of their journey, preserved for when the boys were old enough to understand. Nicole and Caleb, who had bought a house just down the street, helped with the moving process. Their proximity was no accident. The bonds forged during their struggle had created a need to stay close, to remain a daily part of each other's lives. "Remember when we first met?" Nicole asked Amanda as they unpacked boxes in the sunny kitchen. "I was supposed to help take your babies away. Now I'm helping you build their home." The master bedroom suite, with its view of the garden and mountains beyond, became Adam and Amanda's sanctuary. The walk-in closet held equal space for his suits, and her more casual wardrobe a small detail that spoke volumes about their shared life. Mrs. Chen's quarters, a comfortable apartment over the detached garage, gave her both independence and proximity to the family she had chosen. Her daughter, now working as a counselor for families affected by trafficking, was a frequent visitor. The heart of the house was the great room, where floor-to-ceiling windows brought the outside in. Here, Lucas and Logan's play area occupied one corner, visible from the kitchen, where family meals were prepared. A massive stone fireplace promised cozy evenings and family gatherings. "We'll make new memories here," Adam said, watching the twins explore their new territory. His recovery was complete, though he carried scars both physical and emotional from the shooting. But those scars had become badges of honor, reminders of what he had been willing to sacrifice for love. The move-in process became a celebration of their journey. Each box unpacked, each room arranged represented another step away from the trauma of the past. The twins, too young to understand the significance, simply delighted in the space to run and play. Pictures began filling the walls, not just recent photos of their hard-won happiness, but older ones too. Amanda's parents smiled from frames in the hallway, their memory honored in this new beginning. Even a photo of Sarah from happier times found a place, a reminder that forgiveness was part of healing. As evening fell on their first night in the new house, the family gathered on the back deck. The twins, exhausted from the day's excitement, dozed in their parents' arms. The sound of the stream mixed with wind in the trees, creating a peaceful symphony so different from the city's constant noise. This is what we fought for, Amanda realized, looking at her sleeping sons, at the man who had become their father, at the extended family that had grown from adversity. Not just survival, but the chance to truly live. The wedding took place in the backyard of their new home on a perfect spring morning. Amanda stood before a flower-covered arch, wearing a simple white dress that made her look more radiant than any designer gown could have achieved. Adam waited for her, his eyes never leaving hers as she walked toward him, each step a testament to their journey from strangers to soulmates. Lucas and Logan, now 18 months old, served as ring bearers, though Mrs. Chen had to guide them down the aisle. Lucas, serious as always, carefully carried his little pillow, while Logan charmed the guests, with his occasional stops to wave at familiar faces. Their matching suits, miniature versions of Adam's, made them look like perfect little gentlemen. "From the moment I saw you in the rain," Adam's vows began, his voice steady but filled with emotion, "I knew my life would never be the same. You and the boys didn't just enter my home, you brought life back to my heart." Amanda's response came from equally deep feelings. "You didn't just save us that night," she said, squeezing his hands. "You showed me what real strength looks like. Not in wealth or power, but in the courage to open your heart, to choose love over safety, to become a father to children who needed you as much as you needed them." Caleb, standing as best man, watched his sister with pride and joy. Beside him, Nicole wiped away tears, remembering how close they had come to losing all of this. Their own engagement ring caught the sunlight. A quiet proposal had happened just a week earlier, during a late-night strategy session for their new family advocacy law firm. The reception transformed the backyard into a celebration of not just Adam and Amanda's love, but the triumph of their entire makeshift family. Mrs. Chen had outdone herself with the catering, combining traditional Chinese dishes with Western favorites. The twins delighted in the attention from guests, though Lucas remained closer to his parents while Logan charmed everyone with his sociable nature. Former patients from Amanda's nursing days came to celebrate, many of them mothers who had fought their own battles against the hospital's corruption. Maria brought her son, now a toddler, who immediately became friends with the twins. Their presence turned the wedding into something more, a celebration of mothers and children who had refused to be separated. The dance floor saw touching moments throughout the evening. Adam dancing with both twins in his arms, their little heads resting on his shoulders. Caleb and Nicole swaying together, their shared glances speaking of plans for their own future. Mrs. Chen teaching Logan some traditional Chinese dance moves, while Lucas watched with characteristic concentration. But the most poignant moment came during the father-daughter dance. With Amanda's father gone, Caleb stepped in to take his place. Mom and Dad would be so proud, he whispered as they moved across the floor. Not just of what you accomplished, but of the family you've built. A special table held photographs of those who couldn't be there: Amanda and Caleb's parents, Adam's first wife Catherine, even a small picture of Sarah from happier days. Their absence was felt, but not with bitterness, rather. Their memory added depth to the celebration of new beginnings. As evening fell, paper lanterns illuminated the yard, creating a magical atmosphere. The twins, fighting sleep despite their exhaustion, were finally carried up to bed by Mrs. Chen, who had become as much a grandmother as any blood relative could be. Under the stars, Adam and Amanda shared their first dance as husband and wife. "I never thought I'd find this kind of love again," Adam admitted, holding her close. "After Catherine died, I built walls so high I couldn't see over them anymore. But you and the boys, you didn't break those walls down. You showed me they were never needed in the first place." Amanda leaned her head against his chest, feeling his heartbeat strong and steady. "We built something better," she said softly. "Not walls, but bridges. Between past and present, between loss and love, between strangers who became family." The night ended with Caleb and Nicole announcing their own engagement, adding another layer of joy to the celebration. Their planned winter wedding would bring the family together again, another milestone in their shared journey from adversity to happiness. As the last guests departed, the family lingered in the backyard, reluctant to let the perfect day end. The sound of the stream mixed with distant music, the paper lanterns swayed gently in the breeze, and love in all its forms filled the air like a tangible presence. 5 years after the storm that brought them together, the family gathered in their backyard for Lucas and Logan's kindergarten graduation celebration. The twins, now sturdy 5-year-olds with their mother's determination and their father's quiet strength, proudly showed off their certificates to an audience that represented the very essence of what family could mean. "Remember when they were so tiny?" Amanda asked Adam, watching Logan chase fireflies while Lucas methodically constructed an elaborate tower from building blocks. "When all this seemed impossible." The years had brought healing and justice in equal measure. The advocacy center that Caleb and Nicole had founded, now housed in the converted Seattle Memorial Building, had helped reunite hundreds of families torn apart by trafficking. The hospital's dark legacy had been transformed into a beacon of hope. Mrs. Chen, her hair now streaked with silver, still ran the household with loving efficiency, though now she spent most of her time teaching the twins Mandarin and helping them tend the vegetable garden she had planted when they first moved in. Her daughter had married last spring, adding another branch to their expanding family tree. "Tell us the story again," Logan demanded, abandoning his firefly chase to climb into Adam's lap. "About how you saved Mummy and us in the rain." It had become a family tradition, telling the twins the story of their beginning. Not the dark parts, those would wait until they were older, but the tale of love, courage, and family that had emerged from that rainy night. "Well," Adam began, gathering both boys close. It was the kind of rain that makes Seattle famous. "I was driving home, thinking I had everything I needed in life: a successful business, a big house, all the things people say make you happy. But I was wrong. I was missing the most important thing of all." U.S. Logan interjected triumphantly, while Lucas nodded solemnly. "That's right," Adam continued, meeting Amanda's eyes across the patio. "I was missing love. Real love, the kind that makes you brave, that turns strangers into family, that gives you strength you never knew you had." Caleb and Nicole joined them, their own 2-year-old daughter asleep in Caleb's arms. Their journey from adversaries to allies to family was another thread in the tapestry of their shared story. "The real hero of the story," Adam said, "is your mother. She fought for you boys before you were even born. She never gave up, never stopped believing in what was right. She taught me what real courage looks like." Amanda watched her sons absorb these words, seeing in their young faces the perfect blend of nature and nurture. Lucas had inherited her analytical mind, while Logan had Adam's charismatic smile. But both had something more precious, the security of knowing they were loved unconditionally by not just parents, but an entire extended family forged in adversity. The most important thing we learned, she added, gathering her family close, is that family isn't just about blood, it's about choice. It's about people who stand by you when the world turns dark. It's about love that's stronger than fear. Mrs. Chen emerged from the house with a tray of her famous dumplings, the recipe she had finally started teaching the twins. Family, she said wisely, is like my dumplings. Many different ingredients, wrapped together with care, made stronger by heat. As the evening wound down, the adults sat on the patio watching the twins play. The sound of children's laughter mixed with the stream's gentle murmur, creating a symphony of peace that none of them took for granted. We did more than just survive, Nicole reflected, looking at the family they had become. We showed that justice is possible, that love can heal even the deepest wounds, that family is something you can build even from broken pieces. The legacy of their struggle lived on in the hundreds of families they had helped, in the laws they had changed, in the system they had reformed. But their greatest victory sat right there in that backyard, a family bound by love, choice, and the courage to fight for what matters most. This Amanda thought, watching her sons, her husband, her brother, her extended family all together under the setting sun. This is what victory really looks like. Not just surviving the storm, but learning to dance in the rain. And in that moment, as fireflies began to light up the gathering dusk, she knew that their story would continue to inspire others, a testament to the power of love, the strength of family, and the unbreakable bonds forged in the crucible of adversity. Dear viewers, if this story touched your heart, please take a moment to share your thoughts in the comments below. Your perspective and experiences matter to us, and we'd love to hear how this tale resonated with you. Support our team by subscribing to our channel. Together, we can continue bringing you more meaningful stories that celebrate love, courage, and family. Every subscription helps us create content that makes a difference. Share this video with your loved ones. Perhaps they too will find inspiration in this journey of hope and redemption. And don't forget to hit the like button if you enjoyed this story. Join our growing community of storytellers and listeners. Your engagement helps us reach more people with messages of hope and resilience. Thank you for being part of our journey.